Previously we were talking about how to be faster than human reaction time and how to make your responses faster. But then what about in practice? How you should practice to improve this? So I think I mentioned that it's about building a model in your head, what your opponent is going to do. So in order to build that model, one common way is to practice against a training partner that will throw against you different cuts and thrusts and things like that, so you can start to understand how those are coming in. So that's maybe the first step, these simple, fully blown cuts, to understand how they look like and how they move. And then the next step from there would be that nothing gets through fully, so everything will be modified. So if I'm kind of looks like I'm thrusting, actually I'm cutting instead. So this kind of halfway changes. So have your training partner to feed you these more complex actions that change mid-flight. So it's really important to get those down to understand how they come in if you plan to fight against somebody who is using those things. And it's not just the sword, it's also the movement, the stepping. So if somebody is cutting here, are they also moving the same direction, or are they maybe moving to different direction? And this kind of ties back to your training plan, because you need to understand what are your techniques you are planning to use, and then what are you going to go against. So in order to build the response time, reaction time model in your head, you will need to go through all these scenarios and quite many times. And that's just the visual information you are getting in. And then for anything you might encounter, you will have to drill in your responses to those. So depending on your fighting style, this might be different for everybody, but no matter what you use, you will have to drill those in. So you're kind of connecting the incoming visual information to your actual response, what you're going to do. And it's totally fine to have just one response to one attack, for example. For starters, you don't need to have many, because you first need to drill down the basic responses really well. And only once those are done, you will then start adding more if you want. If you try to practice too many things up front, you will just get really confused. So like in the previous training videos, you can pretty much counter everything just by this downward cross-cutting. You don't need the upward, or you don't need this back and forth, for example. This just cross-cutting would be quite enough in order to fight. And you can use that already to do all the baiting and feinting and anything. But then again, you could just use this back and forth cutting for everything. You could just use the round cut for everything. So it's up to you what you want to start with, what feels good for you. And the problem is if you are alone, because then you don't have a training partner. There is one trick actually you can try. I've been experimenting with that myself a little bit. You can take a video of yourself hitting kind of against the camera, and then you are here, and then so when you are playing that back to yourself, you can then do your response when the video plays. And that's been studied a little bit. It should help. The problem, of course, is that it's you there on the screen, and can you surprise yourself? Well, maybe for a little while, but then you can really fast pick up okay, now this is coming, now that is coming, and then you just respond to that. So at that point maybe you would need some other people to do their stuff for you on screen so that you can learn to react to different visual information. And then when you can do it, you can put your training partner to move faster and faster and faster, or have the video playback faster and faster and faster, so that you will have less and less and less time to react and respond. So you start off slowly and then you speed it up until you are at the fighting speed. So what is fighting speed? Fighting speed depends on your opponent a lot, but I would say that you don't have to be much faster. That if you can execute one strike in 0.3 seconds, you are already fast enough. So if your response is like 0.3 to 0.4 seconds from the opponent's movement, you are pretty much fast enough. And then the only thing to understand is the tactical application, because with tactics you create a little bit more time for yourself, and then if your movements are already fast enough, you will do quite well. But understand this, that the faster somebody does something, more difficult it is to respond to that. It's more difficult to see what is going on. And the more complex the attack movement is, the more difficult it is to understand what is happening and react to that. So simple strikes, this would be the first, but then you can have like the ribbon strikes, or maybe even some more complicated ones, so that you need to know like what's happening here. So you need to practice against those, that you don't get confused, because once you get confused, then you will get quite easily surprised, like, okay, what is going on here? And then your response time increases dramatically. So yeah, it's just basically practice, practice, practice and repetition, and try to get the model built in your head. And then, so the model of what is happening, and then you need to connect that model to your responses. So that's the work that has to be done.